Alex Antic is a Liberal Senator for South Australia. Great to have you back with us on Flow.
Thanks, Ricky. Good to be here.
Now, we spoke early on Friday last week, and then you dropped a bombshell around lunchtime. You got any bombshells for us that we need to know about today?
Well, none that I know about, but I'm sure there's something out there for me somewhere. But no, nothing to report.
Yeah, well, the bombshell was, of course, that you declared around midday that you were withholding your vote like Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick. Explain your reasoning for this.
Well, the reasoning is basically that, pardon me, we have a sort of an interesting situation with the Federation at the moment. We've got states around the country that are using their powers under state laws to mandate vaccinations. Now, I'm seeking to make no judgment about vaccinations. I think they're each individual's choice, and they should always be that. But we're entering into a world where people are losing jobs, they're being stood over by employers, and we're creating a two-tiered society. And there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm really uncomfortable with, a lot of basic principles of freedom and people's liberties. Now, these are not ultimately Commonwealth issues, but I think there are things the Commonwealth can do, and those are the things I'm exploring at the moment. I noticed that Gerard Rennick had indicated that he was so passionate about it that he was going to withhold his vote in the Senate on government legislation until something was done about it. We did some work on that space, and I followed him in solidarity, and here we are. So, we're trying to look for things that we can do that add greater protection to people from vaccine mandates. I'm thoroughly opposed to them, but of course, we have to be realistic about the powers that the Commonwealth can do. The Prime Minister's spoken about it. He's indicated he is also he doesn't support mandates outside certain distinct groups like aged care. But I think we need to do more. I think there are things we can do in order to lean on the states, in order to provide support for people that, are losing jobs. Some of this stuff is absolutely tragic. Stories I've been hearing of, a young social worker who is running 3 offices and helping young kids all around the area down in the southeast, and has been told she can't work because she doesn't want to take the vaccine. Well, I say that's her choice, and she shouldn't be marginalised for those decisions.
So, what are we talking about here in terms of intervention from a federal level? I guess you're implying there might be some funding that could flow to these people that isn't otherwise going to them, or is there some sort of constitutional sort of reliance on treaty powers or something to say their human rights are being breached?
It's a really complicated space. Just this week, the thing that I had, my gold standard in terms of what we could do to help people was actually moved by One Nation, which was effectively an anti-discrimination bill. And of course, we've spoken on your show before about the work that's being done, and the bill that's just been introduced this week on religious discrimination. And we've got all sorts of other discrimination acts based on age, gender, disability, sex, and all sorts of other things. We can do that. That space is available. I was disappointed the government didn't support it. I crossed the floor and voted for it. But that was a bill designed to ensure that businesses couldn't sack people for choices they make about their own healthcare, to ensure they couldn't be restricted from businesses, or whatever it may be, and to just ensure that they weren't marginalised. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Ricky, that we were all in this together, and as far as I'm aware, that tagline didn't have as long as you toe the line on vaccination. So we've got to bring people with us. This is, a community effort. People have the right to make their decisions, and I think the Commonwealth can find things to do.
Yeah, well, the discrimination issue has moved, I guess, from immutable characteristics like your race or your something like that to things that are a matter of choice, say your religion. In a number of states now federally, there's a push to protect something based on a choice. So you're saying vaccination is another choice that should be protected in discrimination law?
Absolutely. I think people's medical decisions are their own. Look, we are talking about therapies here which still allow people to transmit the virus and still allow people to catch it. So we're not really, this is back to that issue. We were told by certain sectors to trust the science. That was the tagline. Well, when it comes to the science here, the science is very clear about what these vaccines can and can't do. People should not be marginalised for their own decisions in relation to their own health care, and it is discriminatory. And I think the fact that we've now got Uber drivers and cabbies who are going to be out of work because of their medical choices, to me, is abhorrent.
Now, where do you stand on a similar platform to George Christensen, the member for Dawson? He's suggested civil disobedience may be necessary to get the point across.
Well, look, I'm with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister responded to that and said we should always be obeying the law, and I agree with that. I don't know that George was suggesting riots and melees and those sorts of things. I think he was perhaps being a bit more generous. I didn't actually hear the speech. But no, look, people have a right to protest. They have a right to protest, by the way, without being called white supremacists, far-right extremists and anti-vaxxers. I mean, I was at the Freedom Rally. I saw people with my own eyes and, it looked like to me a very normal crowd full of worried people, a lot of doctors, a lot of teachers, a lot of nurses, all of whom are worried. And I think that's the way to do it. I think people need to have their voices heard. They've got to keep writing to their MPs. They've got to keep talking about it. And I think the stigma of choices that people make on this area really needs to be addressed. This is not, this shouldn't be any different to any other healthcare arrangement. I think this era, unfortunately, has taken us from a society that used to respect these things to one that perhaps doesn't respect them enough, the privacy that is.
Now, you're at odds with the premiers. That would include South Australian Liberal Premier Stephen Marshall. For instance, they've issued a directive on the 11th that from the 11th of December, if you work in any school, including, say, a Christian or non-government school, you can't turn up unless you have had the vaccination doses. So are you at odds with Stephen Marshall with your refusals here on mandatory vaccination?
Well, one of the issues, and one of the issues that's been highlighted out of all of this has been the fact that state parliaments across the country have actually given those powers to the bureaucracy. So these are actually decisions that are being made by bureaucrats. In this case, the police commissioner and Nicholas Spurrier, the SA Health head. And so, I mean, this is part of the issue, that those powers have actually been gifted to the bureaucracy and are not actually decisions that are being made by politicians. Now, I've got some issues with that as well, but this really oversteps politics and enters into the world of what decisions bureaucrats are making. And I think that's part of the problem, because some of these decisions, just don't have any parliamentary oversight. So it's really not an issue for politicians at all, and I think it should be.
But if there is there seems to be some distaste, especially on the border community issues of the way the vaccine politics is being played out. Wouldn't there be a majority in the state parliament for the Premier to take those powers back? He hasn't lost them.
Well, I think they should be rolled back. It's a matter for the Premier and his team. But, remember, this was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We're now almost 2 years into this pandemic, and the fact that some of these powers still exist and are still being used, in my mind, is concerning. As I said, it's a matter for the state parliament and for the Premier. But, I think we're going to find people getting very, very impatient with what's going on. I hear stories already of vaccine passport systems malfunctioning and people not being able to get into events. Now, these might seem like little things, but the cumulative effect, I think, is going to have an impact on people. And I think increasingly we need to get back to what we were doing before very, very quickly.
Well, speaking of effects, your decision to sort of follow the Gerard Rennick model on parliamentary legislation and votes seems to have torpedoed an investigation into the ABC, or have I got that one wrong?
No, look, it didn't. And this is something that Senator Rex Patrick has got wrong. Rex is a bit confused about how the Senate works and has complained about this as well. But the procedural side of the Senate continues to operate as it does. We're able to pair out, so I've done that. We're not here to try and, give control of the Senate to Labor and the Greens. That's not in anyone's interest. So those matters fell, I think, as a result of the numbers just not stacking up. In fact, I think in that case, Gerard didn't pair, so that might have been the issue there. But in any event, no, I was paired out and supported the government's position as I said I would in procedural matters. But when it comes to legislation, I've been very clear. I'm withholding my vote until we can get more protection for people that are struggling, people that are being ejected from their jobs for no other reason other than their own medical choices.
Are you seeking a meeting with the Prime Minister then on this topic?
Oh, look, I'm sure we'll be talking about it. We've got a busy week coming up next week, so there's lots to get through, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it. We've already had some conversations about it, and hopefully those will continue. Now,
just on this final thing, just having mentioned the ABC there, I was asked to question you about this one. David Spears asked Minister Greg Hunt, he said, I guess for families, should they be worried about unvaccinated kids hugging their grandparents at Christmas? What's your response to that type of question to the Health Minister?
The question's the question. I don't really think it's... I think kids should be hugging their grandparents left, right and centre, frankly. I don't... once again, the issue here is that even if kids are vaccinated, they can still pass on the virus. So, I'm not here to give health advice Ricky.
But I guess on the line of questioning from someone from the ABC to the health minister about the appropriateness of kids hugging their grandma.
Yeah. Well, look, the ABC, we don't really expect anything less in some circumstances to be polite, but I don't like the line of questioning. I think this is part of the problem. This culture of COVID fear has to stop. It's got to end, and we've got to get back to normal as quickly as we can. The virus is here; it's here to stay. We've got to deal with it, and people should be hugging their grandma at all opportunity.
Well, that's a great note to finish on, Senator Alex Antic.
Go and hug your grandma.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that myself. Thanks again for joining us on Flow.
Good on you. Thanks.